What's up YouTube? Ryan Panny here, hope you're doing reasonably well. It is time for a review of the new Ghost record Prequelle, out 2 weeks ago now, June 1st. As has consistently been the case since game-changing bands like Bathory and Candlemass in the early to mid 80s, when in doubt, metalheads can always rely on Sweden when it comes to bringing us awesome shit that's different and that's exciting. And that trend kept up in 2010 with this theatrical metal band Ghost, who seemingly came out of nowhere. At least that's how it felt to me. I just remember there being this enormous hype behind their debut record Opus Eponymous, especially from the old school metal crowd. The reason that old school metalheads in particular identified so much with Ghost is that A, with their satanic imagery and their anonymous stage identities, they definitely brought back an element of showmanship and of mystery that was definitely way less prevalent in contemporary metal, aside from like early Slipknot, I guess. And then B, most importantly, musically, their style had really been drawing a lot of comparisons to Boyish or Cult, as well as Merciful Fate, and of course early Black Sabbath and the Maidens and the Priests of the world. And then also it was great for younger fans who just wanted a fucking break from that whole overproduced scream, sing, scream, sing, scream, sing thing that had really run its course by then. Ghosts were definitely a breath of fresh air when they first came out. And even though now in 2018, 4 albums in, the mystique of it all might be kind of gone with this constant stream of blabbermouth articles about how band leader and frontman Tobias Forge and his ex-bandmates are beefing, the music part of it, you can't take away. After a slight stumble on that sophomore record, Ghost really hit it out of the fucking park with their third record, 2015's Memoria, which made my and a lot of other people's year-end list that year for metal. So fans have been really chomping at the bit for a follow-up to that record, and nearly 3 years later, here we are, and Prequelle is that long-anticipated release. And right off the bat, I was really impressed with the lead single and album opener, Rats. The way the song kicks off with that classic fist-pumping new wave of British heavy metal feel with that opening riff, and Tobias' continued choice to sing over these crunchy guitars with that super clean, almost like pristine vocal delivery that like totally eschews any sort of forced grit or tough guy vibe, and I think his vocals and that delivery in particular really help set the band's music apart. And then my favorite fucking part of this song is in the chorus, those whoa-oh vocals that almost bring like a hair metal vibe and make the band kind of sound like Rat for a second. I absolutely love that because I'm such a big fan of that late 80s glam era, and to hear it kind of sprinkled in briefly is just so much fun. And then of course there's the epic heavy outro to this track that actually ties in this album's intro track, Ashes, and it's a killer send-off to a song that I'm gonna call a high point in Ghost's career. Then the next single before the record came out was the pop-inflected Dance Macabre, which I didn't go wild for. It's a tad lightweight, but I did really dig the lyrical narrative on this one. That whole idea of realizing that the end is coming in some way or another, and wanting to have fun and enjoy yourself in that little time that you have left. It's kind of an apocalyptic theme. The first lyric of the song is, "You'll soon be hearing the chimes close to midnight," and that kind of sets the tone for this whole idea of wanting to let loose and give into your urges a little bit despite this undeniably ominous air around you. In a way, it actually kind of reminds me of the Avenged Sevenfold song Acid Rain. And to my point about the band's pop sensibilities, my immediate favorite on this album was the track Witch Image, which, further illustrating what I'm saying, is so fucking absurdly catchy, with the chorus utilizing these real ear candy vocal harmonies and that simple but effective guitar tail that happens in the riff underneath it. They kind of use that to a subtle call and response effect. Not to mention the gorgeous sounding clean guitars in the verses to this song. Yeah, like again, this is the type of song, I guess technically a metal song, but I would play this for anyone. It's just fucking amazing. I mean, the heaviest that this album gets is the second proper track, Faith, which kicks off with those neoclassical guitars that are real tight and then settles into some real headbanging grooves, which it's another album highlight, but other than Faith, I wouldn't really describe this album as aggressive necessarily. I just wouldn't. In fact, aside from the 4 tracks that I've already covered, the entire rest of this album is solely occupied by ballads and instrumentals. No, I'm not kidding. First, there's the 2 instrumentals, Miasma and Helvetesfonster. I'm gonna go with on that pronunciation. They're 2 of the longest and most musically involved tracks on the record, with the former meandering through some slightly underwhelming guitar and synthesizer interplay before arriving at perhaps this album's most delightful surprise, which is the saxophone solo. It's fucking awesome, and it proves, just like Rivers of Nile did earlier this year, that a saxophone can work wonders on a metal record. And then towards the end of the record, there's the stunning second instrumental, Helvetesfonster, which is just sheer beauty front to back, whether it's that haunting intro with the piano and what I believe is a flute on top of it, which I could see this whole intro section being so epic in a live setting with an elaborate stage show and lights and the whole 9 yards. And then after progressing through a few different mood swings and some instruments coming and going, you eventually arrive at the beautiful acoustic outro. And by that point, Ghost have really taken you on a journey, and I feel like this instrumental is a whole new level of composition for the band. And then there's the ballads, which occupy the rest of the record. First up is See the Light, track 4, which in comparison to the fan favorite ballad He Is off their last record, Memoria, which kind of sat in the same spot in the track listing, so you can't help but compare the two, this one really falls flat. There might be things that I enjoy, like that Eat Me, Drink Me thing, which is kind of a twisted reference to Christianity, and also the synth lead section on the song is pretty killer too, but it's not one of my favorite tracks. There's not a lot of replay value in it for me. Then there's the next ballad on this album, Pro Memoria, which, despite making me chuckle a little bit with how that super morbid hook is being sung in like almost this upbeat fashion, like there's definitely humor in the irony of all that, it's also the other weakest track on here alongside of See the Light. It's an instance of Ghost taking that distinguishing strength of theirs that I mentioned earlier, their ability to sort of dip their toes into the pop world here and there, and taking it a bit too far. Like, this song has the sort of gimmicky hook and an overall dullness of like a pop song on a Disney soundtrack or something. And then closing out the record, you have a third ballad, the stadium-sized Life Eternal, which honestly in any other context I probably would have really dug, but now we've arrived at Prequelle's fatal flaw, which is that the band kill their own momentum with this fucking track list. Think about it, this record effectively has 9 songs. 3 of them are ballads, 2 of them are instrumentals, and 1 of them is Dance Macabre, which I already mentioned is sort of poppy and lighthearted. So what does that leave? It leaves the excellent opening pair of tracks, which essentially tease an album that the listener never really gets. By the end of it, it feels like such a betrayal. Like, I remember being up late the night that this came out at 1:30 a.m. looking at the clock after my second listen and being like, what the fuck happened? Like, what happened in the middle of that track list? Where did the album that I thought I was gonna get go? It just sort of disappears. 40 minutes of runtime, excluding the intro, 24 minutes of which is made up of ballads and instrumentals. And look, I love a good ballad and I love a good instrumental, probably more than most people, but at the end of the day, you are still a metal band. You still have to bring the heavy at some point, right? Just the squandered potential on this album makes it the single most frustrating release of 2018 thus far for me. I was ready for like some album of the year type shit, but this album presents this serious pacing issue that I'm honestly pretty surprised hasn't irked a lot of the other bloggers that have been singing this album's praises. You know, maybe it's because despite the track list not flowing the way that I might want it to, the individual moments on here really are great for the most part. Like I said, a ballad like Life Eternal would be very enjoyable on its own. The 2 instrumentals, despite being kind of long, have epic moments. There's a lot of fun to be had on this album in separate pieces, but it's just a case of the whole is not greater than the sum of the parts in this instance. And also, to be fair here, in 2018, the flow of an album, while it may still feel crucial to people like me, it's definitely less pivotal to driving an album's reception nowadays, just because we live in this playlist-oriented streaming era where, let's face it, a lot of these songs are going to be experienced on an individual basis. And so my gripes and my complaints about the track list sequence, it only goes so far for a lot of people, and me included, because I can look at tracks like Witch Image and Rats and Faith and a couple of the ballads and instrumentals as songs that I throw on playlists and continue to define the year for me, despite me not really wanting to sit down and listen to this album through because I get frustrated. Ray Shrummer might be a perfect example of that. The fact that they dropped like 3 albums at once. It was basically like a big fucking playlist and people weren't listening to that thing all the way through. They fucking picked their favorite songs, but if you ask them like, what have you been listening to lately? They might bring up Swaycation or Srem Life 3 or whatever. And quickly here, I also have to give some serious love to Tom Dalgetty's production on this record, which is also playing an enormous role in my overall positive outlook outlook on it. This record has one of the best sounding drum kits that I've heard on a metal record in ages, and I love the way that Andy Wallace mixed the bass on here. Really gives it a chance to shine and a chance to be melodic. And I also enjoy how Tobias's voice is occasionally dunked in tons of reverb to give him that stadium-sized quality. And I think that Tom Dalgety was 100% the person to produce this album, and Andy Wallace was 100% the person to mix it. It is a fantastic sounding album. So, you know, in the 2.5 weeks or so that I've lived with this album and let it breathe a little bit, my anger about it has definitely eased up a bit. I think that even though my point does stand, Ghost have undeniably made some amazing music within these 41 minutes. And you know what, I guess it's just up to me to piece together a slightly better sequence for this track list that maybe more fits my taste or the way I expected this album to flow. Prequelle gets a 7 out of 10 from me. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. If you like this video and are not yet subscribed, please consider doing so by clicking right over here and also checking out any of the other metal-related content that I publish on this channel on a weekly basis. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for supporting, and I will see you soon.